Helicoprion, the shark you won't believe existed. In times present and past, the ocean has held many mysteries close to its chest. Throughout the ages, the depths have been home to an unimaginable number of ecosystems and an unknowable number of creatures. One such animal just so happens to be the topic of today's video, Helicoprion. Get ready for a dive into the deep as we explore all there is to know about this fascinating prehistoric predator. What is Helicoprion? The Helicoprion was a shark-like fish from the Helicoprionidae family and Eugeniodontida order. This creature, and all other creatures from this order, are classified as extinct, with only scant fossil evidence remaining. The term Helicoprion is actually the genus, which is believed to have featured several species. Helicoprion belonged to the Chondrichthyes class, which is a group of jawed fish whose skeletons are mostly made of cartilage. The subclass was Holocephali, which is home to extant species like the ratfish and ghost shark. Although humanity has only explored less than 10% of the ocean, Helicoprion has had well over 300 million years to show itself. Fossil evidence suggests it lived in the Devonian period, which was about 420 to 350 million years ago, all the way to the early Triassic period, roughly 250 million years ago. Unfortunately, accurate dating for Helicoprion is much more difficult than most other prehistoric creatures because, like many Chondrichthyes, Helicoprion's skeleton was cartilaginous. Cartilage skeletons are advantageous for Chondrichthyes because they allow them to grow to large sizes without compromising speed and maneuverability in the water. However, they are disadvantageous to paleontologists because they are not as dense and therefore not as preservable as bone. As such, Chondrichthyes fossils are extremely hard to find, and finding complete skeletons is near impossible, especially underwater. Luckily, many Chondrichthyes, including sharks and Helicoprion, have some parts that do fossilize well: their teeth. Shark teeth, much like ours, are made of calcium-rich enamel. This enhances their density and allows them to be preserved for millions of years. Most dating for creatures like Megalodon and Helicoprion is based on tooth fossils. Helicoprion, in particular, rocked some rather interesting dentition. Unlike the rows of flesh-ripping teeth of sharks we know today, Helicoprion sported a tooth whorl. This whorl was a spiral-like lower jaw that housed a vortex of ultra-sharp teeth akin to a buzzsaw. This unique characteristic has seen Helicoprion colloquially referred to as the buzzsaw shark. Of course, the tooth whorl was also an influence on the animal's official naming, with Helicoprion being the amalgamation of the ancient Greek terms helix and prion. Together, the words translate to spiral saw. The fossil remains indicate that Helicoprion's teeth were serrated. The tooth in the middle of the helix is known as the juvenile tooth arch and is typically hook-shaped. The crowns of the other teeth are triangular. Additionally, Helicoprion's teeth were rooted in the gums but at an angle that hooked them below the preceding teeth. The first Helicoprion fossil was discovered in Western Australia, in a tributary of the Gascoyne River in the late 19th century. Initially, English paleontologist Henry Woodward classified the 15-tooth whorl fossil as belonging to the Eugeniodontid Edestis davisi. However, further study by Russian geologist Alexander Karpinski saw Edestis davisi classified under Helicoprion genus. The tooth whorl was an incredible find for sure, but experts had long struggled to determine where it could be located on the animal, as well as how it worked during hunting and feeding. Early after the animal's discovery and classification, some theorists argued that Helicoprion's whorl was part of the upper jaw. Karpinski himself speculated that the toothy spiral was part of the animal's nose, before arguments by contemporary paleoichthyologists made him reconsider a different placement, the tail. The tail theory was based on the deductions of American paleontologist Charles Rochester Eastman, who argued that the whorl may have been a projection from other parts of Helicoprion's body. For decades, hypotheses came and went. Some even went as far as suggesting that the tooth whorl was part of the dorsal fin. Others argued that it was part of the lower jaw but pointing downwards. Other speculators dismissed Helicoprion as the owner of the whorl altogether, proposing that it was actually a mouthpiece of a great ancestor of modern-day rays. American artist Ray Troll even drew up an interesting piece called A Gallery of Helicopion Hypotheses, depicting the range of wacky animals brought forward by theorists. from Karpinski's toothy tail specimen to upside-down lower jaw whorls to downside-up upper jaw whorls and a great white with a buzzsaw tongue. However, consensus gradually gravitated toward an upward-facing whorl that sat as part of the elongated lower jaw. In 1966, discovery of a well-preserved fossil in the Waterloo Phosphate Mine in Idaho would trigger an investigation that would decide the jaw issue once and for all. Along with a whorl, there were a few fragments of preserved cartilage that seemingly formed part of the Helicoprion's skull and upper jaw. After decades in the exhibits of the Idaho Museum of Natural History, a student named Jesse Pruitt started asking questions. Pruitt soon teamed up with the museum curator, Leif Tapanilla, and picked the brains of several consultants, including the artist Ray Troll. The duo then took the fossil to a computed tomography (CT) scan at the University of Texas High-Resolution X-ray facility. The scan came out better than the research team could have hoped and revealed a wealth of 270-million-year-old secrets. The first discovery was that the tooth whorl wasn't simply a part of Helicoprion's lower jaw, but it was the whole lower jaw. There was virtually no space between the tooth whorl and the animal's apparent jaw joint. The spiral saw was also held in place by a lining of cartilage. The secondary discovery was that the teeth on the whorl were the entirety of Helicoprion's dentition. The animal's upper jaw had 0 teeth according to the scan, a very strange finding given what we know about modern sharks. The skull fragments also showed that while the animal likely had the torpedo-esque shape of a typical shark, Helicoprion was not technically a shark, at least not in the way ichthyologists define what a shark is. Strictly speaking, the CT scan revealed that the skull cartilage had a double connection structuring that was unique to animals in the Holocephali subclass of the Chondrichthyes class. The only surviving order from this subclass is Chimeriformes, which is home to species like the ratfish. Modern sharks, like the blue, tiger, and great white, also belong to the Chondrichthyes class, but they are from a different branch. Unlike Helicoprion, modern sharks belong to the Elasmobranchi subclass, which means they are not as related to Helicoprion as initially believed. In fact, a great white shark is more closely related to a stingray or a sawfish than it is to Helicoprion. So if we're being strict about it, Helicoprion was more of a buzzsaw-wielding ratfish than a shark. However, based on the scans of the cranial fragments and scans of other eugeniodonts, Helicoprion seemed to have many shark-like features. The triangular and downward-pointing pectoral fins, prominent dorsal fins, and equally forked tail fin are but a few of the hallmarks of a predatory superfish. Like other extinct eugeniodonts, like Fidenia, Helicoprion may have had 5 or 6 gill slits on either side of its body. Interestingly, fossil finds in Kazakhstan have also revealed what appears to be well-preserved Helicoprion scales. These scales, known as odontodes, are covered in thin layers of enamel, which allows them to be preserved for a long time under the right conditions. These skin teeth are very similar to the scales of true sharks, which are called dermal denticles. It is unclear how many species of Helicoprion there were, but most paleontologists agree that there were at least 3. These were Helicoprion bessonowi, Helicoprion davisi, and Helicoprion ergosiminon. However, with an existence that spanned over 200 million years and entire oceans to comb through for fossils, 3 might not even be scratching the surface. Potential species like Helicoprion savalis and Helicoprion mexicanus are still awaiting substantial differentiation from the established 3. Where did Helicoprion live? The scattered finds of fossils suggest that Helicoprion, as a genus, lived and thrived globally. Fossils have been found in Australia, Eurasia, and the Americas. Given what we can gather about its physiology, Helicoprion may have been an open-water hunter like many shark species. If it was anything like the members of the Chimeriformes branch of its subclass, Helicoprion may have been a deep-sea dweller. What did Helicoprion eat? This fish's unique dental setup would have been a sight to behold in action, but much of it remains a mystery. Experts continue to debate, but there is a general acceptance that Helicoprion ate soft-flesh prey like cephalopods. This may have included squids and octopi. Tapanilla and Pruitt's research publications concluded that Helicoprion used the tooth whorl to hook prey and guide it toward its gullet to be swallowed whole. The buzzsaw may have also worked to pull these prey animals out of their shells. The research team also proposed the possibility of the whorl partially rotating in conjunction with the closing of the jaws. This would have served to maximize the efficiency of hunting and feeding. Whether Helicoprion's diet extended to vertebrates is unclear, but it is not beyond possibility. The 2015 journal publication by Jason B. Ramsay explored the biomechanics of the Helicoprion jaw and determined the animal had different feeding strategies for different prey. Additionally, the animal's teeth were found to serve different purposes. The teeth at the front of the spiral were for hooking prey into the mouth. The middle teeth were for skewering prey. Afterward, the rear teeth would guide food into the gullet for swallowing. How big was Helicoprion? Without a full skeleton, we may never know the precise mass and dimensions of this prehistoric predator. Our best bet is on educated estimations. Again, size estimates are mostly based on fossilized whorls. Oleg Lebedev, a Russian paleontologist, came up with a rough size estimation range based on the diameter of whorls. For instance, a Helicoprion specimen with a whorl diameter of 14 to 16 inches may have measured between 16 and 26 feet in length. The upper end of that range would make Helicoprion longer than the average great white shark. The biggest documented whorl find is currently the subject of much deliberation, with some experts suggesting it belongs to a new Helicoprion species. This massive jaw, which also belongs to the Idaho Museum of Natural History, measures an impressive 22 inches in diameter and has teeth with crowns up to 5.5 inches long. Based on Lebedev's estimations, the animal that wielded this massive buzzsaw was potentially well over 30 feet long. For now, weight estimates are a complete shot in the dark and completely open to speculation. However, if we deduce based on a creature of similar length like a basking shark, it could be possible that bigger Helicoprion species were well over 8,000 pounds.